Well, I'm so glad to introduce to you Mike MacNeil once again. He was with us last June, and I sent him a message maybe a month ago or so just to say, hey, any free spots, any available weekends in the next few months? And he tossed this date my way, and I thought it was awesome. And so, Mike, thank you so much for coming. Would you give a warm welcome to Mike MacNeil?
Thanks, John. Well, it's great to be with you this morning. And I appreciated that prayer. We live in a very troubled world right now, don't we? But bad times for the world are good times for the gospel. And they're good times for the gospel. And so a lot of people trying to worry their way to peace or anger their way to peace, but really prayer is the only way, to peace. And I would encourage you with inviting people for Easter. My wife, Colleen, became a Christian at Easter because somebody invited her to church. And I think God can still do that. I spoke at a prayer breakfast in Sussex a little while ago, and I invited our next door neighbor. And he had just lost his wife, and I knew he was hurting, so I invited him for breakfast. And then he liked it at the church, and so he's been coming to church ever since. And he'd never been in an evangelical church before in his whole life. So his whole picture of church was, he was like, "You guys have coffee? I don't have to wear a suit?" He was just, everything was blowing him away, and he doesn't know any of the rules, right? So he's sitting beside me, and it makes church so much more fun. He's sitting beside me, and he's saying right out loud, he's going "That girl can really sing." And I'm like, yes, she can. And he's like, and then at the end of the service, the pastors come up and they say, if anybody needs prayer, we're just going to be up here during the last song. And so people start to come up, and he goes "What are they doing?" And I'm like, well, they have something special that's, a need that's going on in their life, and so that they just want special prayer from the pastor today. Oh, okay. And so I get to narrate what God, and it's refreshing. It's refreshing for me because I'm realizing oh yeah, this is what church looks like when you first come in. And you don't know, it's not a normal thing, and it's like a whole new world. So I just kind of felt like he's every week he's getting closer, and it might be Easter, I don't know, but I got a feeling like God's just becoming more and more real to him. And so. Today I want to talk out of Mark. I know you guys have been studying Mark, and I want to talk out of Mark 10:46-52. It's a story of blind Bartimaeus, a really familiar Bible story. And it says in Mark 46, it says that Jesus and the disciples, they came to Jericho. And his disciples, together with a large crowd, because there was something about Jesus that just drew people. They were leaving the city, and there was a blind man named Bartimaeus, which means son of Timaeus. So very ordinary. This is Bart, and he's the son of Tim. He's just a very ordinary guy. Sitting by the roadside begging. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." A really loud prayer. And it says that many rebuked him and told him to be quiet. What are you doing, Bart? Jesus is a celebrity. You can't be acting like that. And they try to quiet him down. And I love this part. It says, but he shouted all the more, even louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And in verse 49, this got Jesus' attention. Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called to the blind man, cheer up, on your feet, he's calling you. Then it says, throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. And then Jesus asked him almost an offensive question. It would be offensive if Jesus didn't have the power to do something about this. Jesus asked him, what do you want me to do for you? And the blind man said, kind of obviously, like, Rabbi, I want to see. And then in verse 52, Jesus says, go, your faith has healed you. And immediately he received his sight, and he followed Jesus along the road. So Jesus and the disciples are on the Jericho road. And the disciples have just had an argument. They don't quite get it yet. They've had an argument about power, like who is going to be Jesus' right-hand man, who's going to be the most powerful when the kingdom comes. And Jesus sets them straight and says it's not about power, it's about serving. And it's a rough road. There's rough characters on this road. I've been on the Jericho road, and even to this day, it's a rough place with rough characters. When I was there were all these guys like just kind of hanging out, like drinking. There was this little Arab kid on a donkey. And I thought, well, that'd be a cool picture. Hey, can I take your picture? And he's like, for $1, right? And so the Jericho road, it was kind of a rough road with rough characters. There was a motley crew there, and I'm not talking about the band from the 80s, okay? There's just a motley cast of all different kinds of characters. There's all kinds of noise and all kinds of action. And then there's blind Bartimaeus, and he's sitting by the roadside begging. He's the lowest of the low. There is no welfare system. There is no social safety net. We don't know whether he was born blind, whether something happened to him and he became blind. We don't know any of his history at all. All we know is that Bartimaeus is like he's sitting in the dark, and he probably only has like two possessions. He has his beggar's cup, because he lives on alms and the kindness of strangers, and he has his cloak. His cloak is just kind of like an all-purpose. When it rains, it's an umbrella. When the sun's too hot, it shades him. When he's cold, he wears it as a jacket. It's his. Now, to be honest, this is just a blanket that I borrowed from Air Canada. Okay, it's not really like an authentic cloak, but I grabbed it on the way out of the house today. And so, but he's sitting there, and he's sitting like in the darkness. He's sitting in the dirt. He's like the lowest of the low, and he's sitting, and he's just alms for the poor. He's just begging. That's the only way that he can get by. And he starts to hear people talking. They're like, Jesus is going to come through here. Have you heard Jesus is going to pass along the road? And something in Bartimaeus, he knows that this is his chance. He's heard all of the rumors about Jesus. Jesus, the disturber of religious comfort. The guy that really bugs the Pharisees. Jesus, the healer. Jesus, the guy who, when he goes to funerals, resurrections happen. He's heard all of these stories about Jesus, and he realizes that like the God of the universe is coming to my neighborhood. This is my chance. This is my one opportunity to really get Jesus' attention. And so when Jesus and the disciples pass by, he doesn't care anymore. He doesn't care about the crowd. He doesn't care what people think. Like he just shouts out like, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And it's really a prayer. And the crowd is greatly offended because the crowd is looking at Jesus as a celebrity. And it would be like if King Charles was about to like go down Coronation Court or something. You could be like, Pastor John couldn't go like, I really want to talk to Charles. I think I'll try to get his attention. Like the motorcade is rolling through, and Pastor John jumps out in the middle of the road like, hey, Charles, we need to chat. I got some things I want to say. You could be sure that the RCMP would take him down really, really quick, right? Like you can't just act like that, or there's protocol around important people, and that's the way they're like. They're like, be quiet. You're causing a scene. This is not the way we act around important people. It's not the way we act around Jesus. And that what I love is that just makes him all the more loud. And he shouts the second time like, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And sometimes in church we just get. Sometimes we just get so religious sometimes, and we have rules about what's appropriate and what isn't appropriate, and how you're supposed to act and how you're not supposed to act. But the tragedy of that is that sometimes we come through the doors carrying very, very heavy burdens, and then we act like everything is okay. And then we carry those same burdens out. When Jesus would rather have us cause a scene even sometimes in faith and get his attention. And so the crowd hates this, but Jesus likes it. Jesus stops and he looks and he says, call that guy over. Call that guy over. I want to find out what this is about. And then the crowd suddenly turns. They're like, oh, Jesus is okay with this. And so they say, cheer up. Get on your feet. Because Jesus is calling you. So if you don't hear anything else I say today, that's the word of God for today. Cheer up. Get on your feet, because Jesus is calling you. He's calling us today. And so that's like, I love you, man. Can I take you on the road with me somewhere so you can just go to, because there's a lot of churches where people don't talk back. I'm used to talking back. And so the last time I preached, by the way, this is so refreshing for me. I just got back from Guatemala. The last time I preached was a trilingual service. I was in a Mayan village. The name of the village is Agua Caliente, which sounds really cool until you find out it means hot water. So I was literally in the village of hot water, and that's how because they have like a volcanically heated waterfall next to the village, and as I was there, it was like that they speak Quechua. And so I was doing the message in English. Then it would be translated to Spanish because the Quechua pastor was bilingual but only understood Spanish and Quechua. And so it would go English to Spanish to Quechua, English to Spanish to Quechua. You have no idea how much your mind can wander, like in between those things. And a 10-minute message takes 30 minutes to deliver. And so this just seems so like quick today. We're just going right to the English. And so blind Bartimaeus, he's like sitting there, and they're like, get up, get on your feet. Jesus is calling you. And he's like, I love that. Like he just like, it says he throws off his cloak. This is like one of his valuable possessions. He throws it aside. He puts his cup down, and he literally runs to Jesus. He's blind. He has no idea where Jesus is, but he's getting there as fast as he can, right? Because he's got faith. He's got faith that Jesus can do something. He doesn't have to be told twice. And then Jesus asks him that loaded question. What do you want me to do for you? And he's like, Lord, isn't it obvious? Like, I'm sitting in the dirt. I'm sitting in darkness. I want to see. That's my greatest need. I want to see. And then Jesus just simply says, go. Your faith has healed you. And Jesus restores his sight. Why did Jesus, out of all the people in the crowd, I'm sure just like in every crowd, there's all kinds of needs. Why in that crowd did Jesus particularly pay attention to Bartimaeus? I think there's some things about Bartimaeus that might give us clues to why he got God's attention. He was humble. He was sitting in the dirt. You know, the Bible says that if we humble ourselves, that God will lift us up. But if we're proud, God will be against us. And we live in such a proud culture where we're trying to do everything on our own, and it's hard for us. It's hard for us to humble ourselves. But Bartimaeus was in a humble position. And he was humble and he was honest. He was really just direct and honest with God about what was going on in his life. For about the last 30 years, I've done prison ministry. And as odd as this sounds, one of the things I love about prisoners is their honesty. As strange as that, like, really? Criminals? Well, yeah, when they come to chapel, they just come like with everything that's going wrong in their life, just like right on their sleeve. Sometimes in church, we pretend too much. We pretend. And we live in a culture where, it's where that is kind of encouraged sometimes. And I was preaching at Spring Hill Prison one time, and I usually we would do a service, and then we would just afterwards we would go like one-on-one with the prisoners. But I really felt like I was supposed to give like an old-fashioned altar call this time. And so I was like, okay, God, I'll go with it. And so I was like, I feel like somebody here needs to come to the front to pray. And there's a guy at the back. I found out later, his name was Adam. And Adam is like, I give this altar call, and it's a preacher's nightmare. Like, everybody's just staring at me. Nobody's moving, right? And finally, Adam, like sitting 6 rows back, he goes, nobody's going to do that. And so I just start talking to him. I'm like, how come? And he's like, because we're all trying to act tough in front of each other, and that would show weakness. And then he goes, but I am kind of interested in what you said. So I'm like, well, how about if after I pray, I come and I sit down with you and we have a chat? And he goes, how long is it going to take? And I'm like, what? You have somewhere you're going? Like, you're in prison. Like, you have some big agenda I don't know about? And I'm like, give me 5 minutes. And so I close the service, I go back, and I have this amazing, like, 25-minute conversation, like, with Adam. But I just love that kind of honesty. There's something about that honesty that just makes it so much easier for God to work. I think Bartimaeus was also desperate. There's something about us getting in a desperate place and being willing to make a scene that just grabs God's attention. And he sees the courage and the faith that it takes to do that. And I think what's gone on in Asbury, the Asbury revival, like all the attention that was focused on that last month, I think a lot of that was just about people getting desperate enough just to seek God. Like, I don't care what this looks like. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care what other people think. We're just desperate enough, God. We're so desperate that we need you. And then finally, Bartimaeus was responsive. Jesus didn't have to call him twice. He was just responsive to the gospel. When Jesus called him, he got up and he came. And when God knows that we'll respond, it really gets his attention. And so there was a lot of things about what was going on in Bartimaeus' life that made him a prime candidate to receive the grace that Jesus had for him in that moment. So, and then it says at the end, it says that when he received his sight, like he didn't use his sight to oogle the ladies or play video games. Like it says that when he received his sight, that he followed Jesus along the road. Followed Jesus along the road. So like his heart was in the right place. He was right where he needed to be for God to work. So what's the point for us? Well, the point is that we're at some point in our life, we're all Bartimaeus. Bartimaeus had suffered a loss in his life. He was in a state of loss, and we've all experienced that. Life is a rough road, and we get knocked down sometimes. Sometimes we find ourselves in the dirt, and we find ourselves in places that feel pretty dark. But the good news is that Jesus loves to restore what the devil has taken. He loves to reverse it. I'm a sucker for all those man shows on TV. All the really dumb ones where it's the same plot over and over and over again, but for some reason you just watch them. So they're kind of like the men version of Say Yes to the Dress. It's like the same every episode. But it's different. And there's one where it's called Airplane Repo. And it's about like, it's one thing when you repossess cars, but when you repossess airplanes, you have to kind of sneak, start the plane, take off before they catch you. And so I was watching that, and I was doing my devotions at the same time. And when you do that, weird things come out. And so I felt inspired to write a poem, because it suddenly occurred to me, like, Jesus is the Father's repo man. Jesus came to, like, take back everything the devil has stolen from us. And so I wrote this poem called Repo Man. From prison church to drug rehab, redemption is no smash and grab. An inside job, a well-planned heist. The mastermind, the one called Christ, reaches deep in darkened cells and shines a light on private hells. He's taking back what Satan stole and filling in the God-shaped hole. With kingdom keys and nail-pierced hands, Jesus is God's repo man. And Jesus is in the restoration business. Whether it's a lost relationship that we're struggling with, lost health, lost peace, a lost job, a lost sense of purpose. In life, we all struggle. We all struggle sometimes with loss. And sometimes in church, we're like that crowd that was trying to silence Bartimaeus when actually we should be crying out to Jesus. I want to tell you about one of my students this year at Kingswood. He's a little older. He's 28 years old. His name is Cody. Cody was a car salesman, and up until about 4 years ago, he had life by the tail, and he was selling a lot of cars. He was good at his job. Things were going well. He didn't grow up in the church and didn't feel like he needed to go to church. And then he was out on a test drive with somebody, and kind of got T-boned by a truck, and it was a very, very serious accident. And he had to take time off of work. He was in a lot of physical pain. He got hooked on. They gave him all kinds of medication, which he got hooked on, and then was diagnosed from the accident. Was diagnosed with PTSD, and was having mental problems, and his life just suddenly took a downward turn, and he was in pain. He was addicted to painkillers and was just in this dark spot in his life. He was living with his girlfriend, who at the time was a Wiccan, and just in a dark spot. And woke up one day. Who knows why he had this thought? Woke up one Sunday and said, I should go to church. He has no idea why he had that thought. Never had that thought before. And he just looked. He lived in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, looked for the nearest church to where he lived. And it was a little church plant called South Church that Yarmouth Wesleyan has planted down in a poor neighborhood in Yarmouth. And he just went in and sat in the back row. Kind of checked out what was going on. But what the pastor was saying made sense to him. And so he started every Sunday. He would pull himself out of bed and he would go sit in the back row. And people started talking to him, and then he moved up to the second to the last row. And as relationships built, he kept moving further up until he, one day he just realized he needed Jesus in his life, and he accepted Jesus, but had all these, he had all these issues going on, and asked Pastor Jason Parker was there speaking, and was kind of trying to get advice from Jason Parker, like what he should do next with his life. Like, what I gave my life to God, but I don't know what to do. And Jason said things that all good pastors say when they don't know what else to say. You should go to Kingswood. That's what he said. Like, figuring your life out, go to Kingswood. I know a guy there who runs a program. Go to Kingswood. And so he showed up at Kingswood, and he was still he's walking with a cane, still pretty beat up. His mind was still kind of foggy, and I started to just watch God like transform him, restoring all of the things that had been taken away. And he hasn't been healed instantly, but you know what? He's walking without a cane now. And that's a major thing. He's walking without a cane. And he hasn't had any alcohol or drugs for 8 months solid. And that's worth clapping for. And his mind is like resetting back to clarity. And I had him at Teen Challenge last Thursday. I was like, Cody, how'd you like to preach a sermon? He's like, I've never preached a sermon before. And I was like, I know, that's why I'm asking you. Like, how'd you like to preach a sermon? He's a little nervous, but man, he preached a sermon to all these guys like trying to get their life off of drugs. And man, he hit it out of the park. And it's so exciting. It's so exciting to see what God can do in somebody's life, right? And like, who knows what God is going to do with Cody's story? Like, he was a young guy, and he thought everything was going great, and then he runs into this circumstance in his life which just totally knocks him off his feet. And he thinks it's the worst thing in his life, and for a while it is. But God is in the business of taking those worst moments and turning them around. He really is. And that's what he's been up to in Cody's life. He's turning that situation around, and Cody will even tell you, like, people have prayed for him to be instantaneously healed, and you know what he told me? He said, I am glad that I have not been instantaneously healed, because I'm afraid that I might start going back if I didn't have to rely on God every day. And so I think God is teaching me something along the way. I think there's something that I'm learning in this process that I could not learn any other way. And I was like, you have some wisdom, my friend. That's exactly what God is up to in your life. And so the good news today, if you're facing some tough circumstances, if you can relate to blind Bartimaeus, the good news is that Jesus is in the restoration business, and that he has a way of giving us back everything that sin in the world and Satan kind of wants to steal from us. And Jesus today, he's calling us to himself. He's saying to us, like, get up, get on your feet, because I'm calling you. And I know that we can't tell God what to do, but we can tell him what we want. That's what Jesus invited blind Bartimaeus to do. What do you want me to do for you? And faith always gets God's attention. Always gets God's attention. And when we can bring him our needs in faith, we know we can't boss him around. He's God and we're not. But we can say, God, this is what's going on in my life, and this is what I'm asking you to do. And when we do that, God will respond. Sometimes it's not in the exact way that we expect. But what I've found is that God will when I pray, God will either shows me his peace or his power. He will either give me that peace that passes understanding to go right through the trial with a total sense of his presence, or he will act and change the circumstances and show me his power. But he always answers prayer, one way or the other. He will give us exactly what we need and what his will is for our lives. And so I just want to encourage you today. To be quite honest with you, we all go through mountains and valleys. I want to encourage you because I'm in a very positive, encouraging, mountaintop time in my life right now. But I also know what it's like to be in the valley. And so I want to encourage you as a church and as individual Christians today to cry out to Jesus. To not worry about what anybody else thinks. To not worry about what protocol might be or not might be, but like just to very honestly just bring your needs to Jesus today and say, here I am, God, and this is what I'm praying that you will do. And there will be other people that will gather around you and put a hand on your shoulder, because Christianity's not a solo sport. We are in this thing together. And when we get honest and desperate as a church and we pray, that's when God moves. That's when God moves.